private sector in, I've forgotten which state it was, but in several of the states have more benefits working in the private sector than they actually do in the public sector. So we're in the whole process of renegotiating what it means to be a worker or a professional in an organization. That's one part of what unions are for. I also think that unions, you know, unions also help to get down class size. That's very important for students.
I want to talk about class size because okay, two things. I remember when I went to school, we had 48 desks, 48 students. We had an A and B. So if you were, like, say, in 2A or 2B, you would be 6 months younger. So while I was reading, I would hear what the teacher was talking to the A students, and you know what? Children are they're like sponges. They can, you know, they're multitask. You know, they're not, you know, they could do more than one thing, hear more than one thing, and grasp more than one thing. So I was learning the A while I was sitting in the B. So, and they also talk about that in Finland, and they made a study. It isn't about class size. You could have big classes and learn better. You know, the most important thing is having somebody monitoring, you know, a teacher with a monitor. And she could pick out the children that are having more difficulty and the ones that are, you know, also doing very well. But they also said that you have to pay attention also to the students that are really highly functioning, because they're getting forgotten about too. So you can't just be looking into the ones that are not working to the capacity. You have to look at the ones, because the ones that are working with the capacity, they start getting bored. They're getting bored, and then they start losing interest. So it isn't about class size. We're so worried now, oh, we got to put down the class size to a very few. But hey, we learn very well. All of us, look, you're a teacher, you're a principal, you're a superintendent. We don't count you because you're younger than all of us. But look, we're from 48 students in a classroom.
Suzanne, I was just going to say that 48 students in the classroom is exactly the number I had when I was going to school. And Miss Bourne was the best teacher I ever had, because she knew how to get to each child. She got to me, and she had me learn math, which wasn't easy at the time, but it got through to me, and I was so excited because she had me go up and down the rows, and we were competing with one another. We were excited, and that's what education is all about, being excited about what you're doing.
But you know, we also have to realize that the times today are not the same as they were when we grew up. So you know what, I would like to say that everything is the same, and that, you know, 48 kids in a class, and we probably all have experienced that, probably everybody but Katie at some point. But it's a different world today. When we take a look at the problems that society is dealing with, when we take a look at the gangs, the drugs, just the violence that takes place. You know, there may have been a small amount of that, you know, when we were, or some, you know, measure of that, but now it is much more open, much more, even with technology today, and the texting and sexting and everything else. I was just about to say,
we have to look at what's going on in the communities and all the aspects that they have to deal with there, but then we also have to look at, we're in a different day and age in technology. Kids now, everyone has an iPod, laptop, cell phone. If you don't know technology, they can't communicate otherwise.
So are you saying that some of these teachers don't know the technology? A lot of the kids, and I have to speak for my grandkids, you know, one day I was putting a movie on, and they said, Nana, you're putting the movie in upside down. That's why it's not working. I mean, I guess, you know, we don't have the technology training that the younger what you're doing, and probably younger, and probably some of your students even have more technology training than you do. I know you're pretty good with technology.
Pretty good. I try to keep up with the times. But when you know, we talk about the 2 million minutes. I know when I was looking at the video, there's actually a really powerful video. No speaking whatsoever, and the kids are just holding up signs, and it's all about the way that they learn, and we need to encourage that creativity, because it's a different time. You know, we still need to teach them, you know, appropriate ways of communicating in proper grammar, because they seem to have lost that with all the technology. But we also have to work within that realm, because that's what they know, and that's where we're moving.
I just want to, for our viewers, 2 Million Minutes is a documentary by Memphis businessman Robert Compton, and it's an intriguing look at how 3 superpowers, China, India, and the United States, are preparing their students for the future.
And we just explained the 2 million minutes because I thought it was really interesting. It's looking at once a student graduates from 8th grade and goes into high school, from the time they enter high school to the time they graduate, there's approximately 2 million minutes that we have to prepare them for the real world.
And the question becomes, what do we do with those 2 million minutes?
Everyone has that same amount of time.
That's right.
Exactly.
They were showing in one of the films I saw in the 2 million, American kids were watching Grey's Anatomy, while the other ones, in contrast, the children from China and India were studying, and even on Sunday they were studying. They were doing, and they do have some time for, they play violin and they do performance, you know, but ours was mostly occupied with, you know, television. Our kids were watching TV, they were playing on the computer. I mean, they weren't doing homework on the computer, they were playing. They were playing games and everything. And we're not preparing them, and maybe it's the parents too have to take responsibility.
Absolutely. There was one student in the 2 million minutes from India that stuck out. I remember him saying, where in India, you know, with school, it's education. In some places it's education and other things. He said there it's education and nothing else. Like, it's not, you don't get to do both, it's one or the other. I think it's very important to focus on education and put that emphasis there, but I think it's also very important to focus on other skills as well and have those extracurriculars. I agree that maybe not TV, but, you know, because I remember even, you know, I'm still young, but when I was growing up, we spent more time outside than we did in front of the TV.
Yes.
We were active and we were social and we were going, you know, to the park and playing tag versus, you know, many of my students now who are sitting at home and playing video games.
Right, and they're also going to, I know in order for me to see my grandchildren, I have to make an appointment because they're in they're in dance classes, they're in hockey classes, they're in you know, Little League, they're in gymnastics. I mean, you have to make an appointment. I mean, children, where are the free play? We used to go outside and play and make up our own games. We played
imagination,
and we formed our own baseball teams. We weren't all, you know, it wasn't just all Little League and you know, organized
activities.
Those opportunities for being creative and creativity, and you know, that's one of the things that we're lacking. And I know that in the other countries they have a lot more opportunities for creativity, and we know even when you go back to the days when people would just listen to the radio and didn't have television, you were able to think and create in your mind what this could possibly look like, and now everything is so explicit that kids don't have, you know, the opportunity to really create and to just develop some of these
I remember a good book called, with David Elkind, it's an old book called The Hurried Child. It's my favorite book, and I'm going to make a copy of it, I think, for all my children, so they can see how their children, you know, what's happening to their children, and which is my grandchildren. It's very sad because they're so programmed, they don't have time, and even in classes now, the art classes aren't there anymore. Remember, we had art classes, we had music classes. They don't have that anymore. When do these children create?
Even gym. I used to take gym every day. They don't.
Gym's missing too?
They have it, but it's not every day necessarily. It may be every other day. It may only be for this amount of time. And those classes are important
here again,
too.
this gets to, as we talk about the finances, a lot of this has been eliminated or reduced because of the funding that is required in order to have all of these programs in place. And what you usually find is that where the biggest cuts make and where the greatest need is in our schools, in our areas where we have high levels of poverty. And so those kids are going to suffer even more, because in those communities where parents can afford to take their children to gymnastics, to take their children for private music lessons, etc., they're going to get it in spite of what the schools can provide. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, just what is the priority within this country as far as funding education, and saying that there is no more important, you know, calling and mission that we have as a nation than to educate our children and to educate them at high levels. We can't just look, with No Child Left Behind, we just look internally at our nation and how are we doing compared to schools within our state, etc. Because we know that right now, until we move to the Common Core, that the standards for each state vary, and so therefore we're only comparing within a state. But we've got to be broader than that. We've got to look, how do we compare to other nations? How do we compare to Finland, to India, to China? How are our kids doing? Can they compete? Are they successful? And we're finding that our kids are not competing very well. So what does that mean? What does the future say about that?
Isn't it the responsibility of the teacher to be more creative and more responsive to the child?
But they have to be autonomous, and I think that in Finland they're allowed to be. They have more autonomy. They, you know, I think in our school system, isn't there a program they have to follow? Isn't there? In Finland, there's a curriculum that they put together. The teachers is more innovative.
Well, I will say that one thing with the charter schools, that is one of the benefits I feel. We do have a little more autonomy, and there is a lot more allowance, I think, to be creative and unique in some of the curriculum.
And and I think autonomy is good, but I think there also has to be accountability. Because does the autonomy, are we seeing that kids are learning with the autonomy? Because at the end of the day, what I'm concerned about is, are we getting the results our kids achieving? So I don't care whether you have autonomy or if you have something that is pretty scripted, etc. But at the end of the day, are kids learning? And you know what? If kids are learning, because there's more than one way to get to the end, then I say, great, wonderful, way to go, let's keep doing it.
I was listening to a program, and the kids were having a lot of trouble with math. And it was a school that the rap music was really, you know, the kids loved rap music. So they had a teacher, and she taught math in rap. Remember, there was that was wonderful. She got them to learn.
She got excited.
She figured out how children learn. It's not the way maybe she learned, but the way they learn. And she did equations, she did fractions, she did everything with
Suzanne,
rap.
you hit the nail on the head. How do children learn?
That's right.
That's what the teacher has to find out, because each child learns differently. And once she has the key to how that child learns, she is going to end up teaching that child.
And that's part of why it's very hard to have 48 children in a class. Because if you're going to differentiate, which is what that's called now, individualized in the 60s and 70s, it was called individualization. But if you're going to really try to attend to where each child is at, whether it's enrichment or whether it's extra help and support, it's very hard to do that with 48 kids.
Absolutely.
Class size is actually is one of the things that people talk about, but they say unless you can reduce the class size below 15, it doesn't really matter much. But then after 30 something, after 30, 31, 32, then it becomes more difficult again. So within that range. But imagine trying to, in this society, if your goal is to get children to do to be able to do higher order thinking and problem solving, imagine trying to do that with 48 kids in a class.
Now, what they did in Finland, they separate the children in high school. They keep the children in the same school. What we used to do, we used to go from kindergarten through 8th in the same school. Now they're going from kindergarten through 6th, or some schools 7, and they go to another school. Then they go to another school, where they believe that the child feels most comfortable in one school, and they keep them in that school until they go into high school. Then they separate them the last 3 years of high school, and based on their grades and the structure, they said that 53% will go to an academic high school, and the rest will enter a vocational high school. And we talked about before, it's an honor to go to a vocational high school. It isn't just, oh my God, it's that person's a real dropout or something, or a failure. They have to go to this other type of school, but they come out with a profession. And a lot of our kids are going to college. What do they come out with? They learn philosophy or whatever, and they're not coming out with a vocation, and they can't can't find jobs, and they end up, you know, maybe they work as waiters and waitresses for a long time before they can even find a job. Why aren't we focusing on vocation? Because that's, you know, getting children to become, you know, sending them to a vocational school where they become an engineer or a science or math or work in, you know, something that would be an industry. Why is it always about, you know, sending them to college for
you know, I think it goes back to
what is that all about?
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about, that we're still stuck in focusing on 20th century rather than 21st century. And we have really got to look ahead and see what are the demands, what are the needs as we move forward in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. When these children are out of school and they need to seek professions, what do they need to be able to do? What is it that the business world and other occupations are looking for as far as the workforce is concerned? You know, also they talked about in Finland in preschool, kids are